All right, welcome everybody to today's webinar. This is part of the Unpacking Coaching webinar series that the National Center for Pyramid Model Innovations hosts. I'm Mary Louise Hemmeter, and I'm going to be your host today. Today, our webinar topic is about addressing challenging behaviors as a united front. And so we're really going to get into how do you support teachers around children who have really challenging behavior. Our panelists are going to talk a lot about resources today, and I want to make you aware that most of the resources that can be available will be on our web page for this webinar. So you can go and get them there, and the PowerPoint will be available there too. I'm really excited today to have three wonderful panelists. Before we get started, I'm going to let each of them take just a minute to introduce themselves. So Nikki, how about you start?
I'm Nikki James. I'm a BCBA working as a behavior support specialist with Murray County Schools in Tennessee. This year, through the Education, Innovation, and Research Grant, I coach kindergarten teachers on implementing pyramid model practices. Along with, I provide individualized support for pre-K and kindergarten.
Thank you, Nikki. Heather?
Hello, I'm Heather Melancon. I am a behavior analyst working alongside the SEL coaches within preschool and kindergarten classrooms in Metro Nashville Public Schools who are participating in a pyramid model grant to support individualized behavior interventions.
Thank you. And Johanna?
Hi, I'm Johanna Berry-Wasser, and I work with the University of Denver as a coach, trainer, and consultant on projects through Pyramid Model and NCPMI Center, as well as supporting children with disabilities in inclusive settings and prevent, teach, and reinforce for young children.
All right, so thank you. And Johanna, I'm gonna hand it off to you to just talk about our objectives for today.
Great. So our objectives today is that participants will be able to identify when it is time to provide a focused, individualized support for a child in a classroom setting, as well as understand the practice around classroom-wide supports or strategies and how to individualize those, and hear examples on how coaching plays a role in implementing individualized supports, either whether you're in an urban or a rural or even a distant coaching setting.
Thank you. And I think that's really important that we're going to try to talk about that, both coaching live and coaching from a distance as much as we can today. Again, we'll be talking about resources, and you'll be able to find them on our resource page at the end of the webinar. So I'm going to start with Nikki and ask you a question. Nikki, can you talk about how coaches can support teachers to know when it's time to provide individualized support for a child versus more classroom-wide support?
Yes, ma'am. In partnership with the NCPMI, coaches and behavior analysts in Metro and Murray schools have collaborated to develop this process on how to guide and when to increase individualized behavior supports, including the use of PTRYC. In our grant, our teams do have access to BCBAs, and that's referenced throughout our flowchart. This outline or a similar one could also guide for more individualized supports without adding additional staff. So once we've identified there is a potential behavior concern, we begin by asking the 3 questions in the purple box. If one or more of those questions are answered yes, then we move into looking at individualization. While if the responses are typically no, then we continue to focus our coaching on classroom around pyramid model. This visual just shows the first step of our process. And throughout this training, we plan to focus on what steps we would take if we answered yes to one or more of those 3 questions.
Thank you. And a few of y'all have already mentioned BCBAs, and I just want to, for those people who might not know what a BCBA is, That refers to a board certified behavior analyst. And so many school districts will have BCBAs that will be available to help support teachers. All right, so our next question is for Heather. And it's after you determine that challenging behavior is happening and that supports are needed for an individual child, what's your first step in supporting the teacher and the child?
So when I'm brought in to support an individual student, I typically begin with looking at the 5 classroom-wide practices outlined in the PTRYC manual. And these take a more in-depth look at the essentials of pyramid. I also use the 2 forms listed behind the Prevent, Teach, Reinforce for Young Children from PTRYC to help determine which strategies we could use to enhance or to offer more individualized supports. But Nikki's going to actually start breaking down the 5 classroom-wide practices right now for individualization.
When these 5 classroom-wide practices are consistently in place, challenging behavior is least likely to occur. I recommend utilizing different strategies from coaching to reflect on ways to enhance these practices. And I always begin by looking through a lens of how can I revamp classroom action plans to ensure fidelity and add specific individualized interventions. So when implementing the first one, the 5-to-1 positive attention, we increase the use of positive descriptive feedback for the child exhibiting challenging behavior. Ensure the feedback is directly linked to the posted rules or expectations of the classroom. And also I recommend being intentional with using that feedback, even if it's directly after a redirect happens. In many classrooms, I have found it's useful to schedule set times for positive descriptive feedback to occur, rather than just looking at, we want to be sure we do it 5 times, actually break down throughout the day when those should occur and when to be intentional. When teachers use that intentionality, they find that they have more success with implementation. Also, the power of filling their emotional piggy bank with short, simple feedback is also crucial to maintaining the relationships. This can be high fives or fist bumps, thumbs up even. And there's handouts for today's presentation include to focus on using this type of feedback. The next one is looking at predictable schedules. Typically in a pyramid model classroom, you have a universal schedule for the class. I always start by looking at when the schedule is currently being reviewed and ask if we could do additional whole class reviews, or if even reviewing with the child individually would be more supportive. In addition, I may suggest adding a small individual schedule with photos of what the child actually doing the activities. By having ownership over the schedule, being able to manipulate it his or herself, and seeing their own pictures doing it, they become more independent or more likely to follow the schedule. I always work with the teacher to analyze the daily schedule to look at both child and teacher directed activities are occurring throughout the day. And during the debrief, facilitate conversations around the lengths of times for those activities where challenging behavior may occur. And many times we can shorten an activity, move an activity to a different time of day, add choices, add some more child-led activities will decrease the likelihood of the challenging behavior occurring. And then the third area we look at with the classroom practice assessment is teachers and I take a closer look at the routines of the challenging behaviors that they are occurring in. And these conversations tend to be best received when I have already observed that specific time of day and can bring data to the debrief when having that discussion. While observing, I always try to collect data that what the children are doing during that time and versus what was actually said or asked of the children, just to be sure those two align. And I watch for children's actions, and I even ask them the 4 questions that you can find in the green box on the slide. Another option is to ask the assistant if they can lead the class activity while you and the teacher both observe the students during that time. The debrief conversation always focuses on how to ensure that students answer those 4 questions from the green box. And we brainstorm if classroom visuals or even an individual checklist would offer the additional supports for the activity. When appropriate, I suggest incorporating embedded interests, choices, or movement opportunities and manipulatives. And Heather will finish those up.
Yeah, so when I'm supporting individualization of classroom expectation, it typically involves breaking down those expectations into specific rules. So making sure the rules are stated positively, they're clear, they're concise to what the teacher actually wants the child to be doing during those specific routines or activities. Some children can benefit from having a smaller set of rules visuals sitting next to them at something like whole group time or in each center, wherever they're engaging in, to provide that constant reminder of what their behavior should reflect. And then going a little bit further, some children may actually need literal pictures of themselves participating and following those rules to make a bigger impact on behavior change. So whether I'm supporting individualization of behavior expectations or teaching peer-related skills, social skills, I often recommend using social scripts to really review what those expectations, the rules, or specific target social skills look like, which can give more detail on what we want the child to do during specific times of the day. And then embedding those opportunities and example scenarios that frequently happen and arise with that specific child. So social scripts are great for that. And then using role play and puppets is another way I individualize modeling appropriate behaviors. And it keeps it more fun and engaging with young children, especially if we can pull in the child's interests. So if we know they like superheroes, I'm pulling in those action figures to really help us out, teach those skills. But no matter what skill we're trying to teach, some students are just not going to be able to generalize the skills they learn from a large group setting to natural use throughout the day. So teaching in small groups or individual times may be necessary. And I think working with teachers to really set those designated times to teach those skills during the day is one of the most important pieces in our coaching. And children need to practice and they need feedback when learning something new. And we know how busy it can be in the classrooms. So without planning for those specific times to teach and practice, it may accidentally get overlooked, which I know happened many times when I was teaching in the classroom. Another individualization strategy that can have big impact on behavior change is using peers within the classroom. And I feel like this is highly underutilized to teach more behavior expectations or social skills. Oftentimes it can be more motivating and actually educational to have that support come from their peers instead of the adults that are constantly telling them what to do during the day. There are a couple of resources that will be shared at the end of the webinar that will help teachers and coaches that we've pulled from challengingbehavior.org to help learn how to utilize peers for instructional support. And of course, as always with the pyramid model, partnering with families is critical, and we want to teach, especially when we're teaching those new skills. So again, we're linking some great resources that we share often with families that align with the 5 classroom-wide practices. And really how we communicate with families about individual student behavior can potentially either help us or create barriers to that success. And I like to challenge the teachers that I work with to continue that same 5-to-1 ratio that Nikki was just talking about when communicating with families. And in my teaching experience, I know how it can sometimes feel like challenges outweigh the positives. It's a struggle every day, I know. But it's necessary when creating a strong partnership with the families. And one of my colleagues actually just shared this week that one of her families in the relationship with the teacher was kind of falling apart due to the constant reports on challenging behavior. And they decided to only share positive notes home, even though challenging behavior is occurring daily, for at least 2 weeks to help rebuild that relationship, which I think will have a huge impact.
Oh my gosh, that was such a good transition to a question that we just got. So I'm going to answer it, and then if you want to jump in and say something as well, Heather, you can. But someone asked a question about, and I know this isn't directly related, but it really is about, could we elaborate on when is a good time to use positive descriptive feedback with kids, and is there certain parts of the day? And as I was sitting here thinking about how I was going to answer that, one of the things I thought about is we ought to be using it all the time, right? We ought to be thinking for an individual kid, when do we use positive descriptive feedback is about when they're doing what we want them to do and before they engage in challenging behavior, right? Because some of the kids that we're talking about on this webinar are kids that get our attention sometimes in really negative ways. And we need to shift that. And one way to shift that is to be sure that we're giving them positive attention when they're engaging in the behaviors that we want them to be engaging in. And the other thing I was thinking was that when we're struggling with a kid, we want to back up and think about how can we give that child lots of positive time. And that's all about the relationship too, which is then what links, Heather, to what you were just saying, which is sometimes we have to back up with families, we have to back up with children, and we have to back up with our colleagues and say, the most important thing right now is working on my relationship with them. And we do that through positive time and attention. I don't know if you want to add anything, Heather, but.
Absolutely. And one thing that I found in my coaching, but also in my own teaching experience is what are the times of the day that you find yourself being a broken record and providing a lot of redirections? Those are usually the times of day when we need to flip it and reinforce those positive behaviors we want to see, those replacement behaviors, and just flood them with all of that positive attention and feedback if we can.
That's a great point. All right, one other thing, just to respond to a quick question, and then I'm going to move us on, is somebody asked a question about whether we think it's a good idea to use the child's picture or photograph when you're making visuals. And I think for children who need individualized supports, the answer is definitely. I think sometimes the process of walking a child through the steps to take the photographs is another way of teaching, right? But definitely, if we're really trying to work with an individual child, having them see themselves do it, either, in photographs, is a really good way to do it. So I think the answer to that would be yes. All right, so I'm going to move us on to the next question that I have for y'all. So my next question really has to do with being reflective and collaborating around individual supports. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, Heather.
Yeah, absolutely. So once we kind of determine what strategies or individualized supports we want to put in place, we're going to continue that coaching cycle. So it's not just giving one, recommendation and then we'll see you later. We're really going to provide focused observations to follow up on the specific strategy and discuss the progress or barriers within debrief sessions. Some common behavior barriers that I often troubleshoot include increasing opportunities to actually practice and reinforce the skill throughout the day and making it a priority to teach versus react. So we'll do a lot of reflection on that. And then within every debrief session, we also ensure the next steps are planned out so we don't lose any momentum. We can keep that going and improving positive behavior. And some of those next steps might be including enhancement of the current interventions, adding a new strategy from the classroom-wide practices, or increasing individualization through teaching social skills, which we'll talk about in a little bit.
Yeah, and I think what you said at the very beginning around we still coach, right? So even when we decide that a child needs a behavior support plan, we're still going to support teachers to implement that plan. And I think that can sometimes be misunderstood by teachers, especially where they think someone's going to come do something to help the child versus we're just going to continue to support you to support the child. So what if a teacher goes through this process and strengthens their classroom practices? You've coached them, their classroom practices are getting better, they're doing the 5-to-1, they're doing the things that you talked about, and behavior's still happening. What do you do next?
Yeah, so members of our grant team developed this tool, which we want to kind of share. I'm going to talk through the first part and then Nikki will pick it up in the second part. We have some examples that we'll kind of go through, but this is a coaching tool to help teachers determine a social, emotional, instructional focus. So we know challenging behavior happens often because there's some social skill needs. And this can be done, this tool can be used class-wide or individually. And we have an example that I'll kind of talk through each of these questions. But the first question, I know it's going to be small to read, you'll have access to the resource. It really has the teacher thinking about what social emotional challenges are occurring repeatedly. What is happening multiple times a day or every day or weekly? And I like to guide our teachers to choose the behavior that's causing the biggest impact on participation. Or preventing or damaging peer relationships, right? And so our example that we want to use for this is peers fighting over materials. It happens every day, all day in our classroom, and that can look different depending on the child. The second question really has us reflecting, has the teacher reflecting on when and with whom does this behavior occur? And the example we'll share with this is when sharing materials in center time. Specifically, if a child maybe has something first and they want it, but it's not necessarily one specific child, we're having multiple children engage in this behavior. And then the next step, question 3, really helps us determine the function or the why behind the behavior. So we can teach the replacement behavior or a new way to meet their needs. And you'll hear that come up often during our webinar today. But potentially we could be writing down different student names here because the same behavior may have different whys depending on why they're doing that. And so our example is that it shows that the children need help with a problem. And we're going to, in question number 4, really go through and guiding what can we teach children to help meet that same need that they are getting when they engage in the challenging behavior. We want to teach a more appropriate way to get their needs met. And so, for example, we want to teach peer interaction skills, asking for something before describing it, gaining a peer's attention appropriately, asking for help if they need some help. And also thinking about maybe some problem solving strategies. Can they identify that there's a problem and are they able to generate a solution? And so the next section, Nikki's going to go into kind of the lesson plan, or what are we going to do with the information we gathered in the beginning to kind of put it into action.
I didn't realize that those were animated, so
That's okay.
there we go.
On the back side of this sheet, we are looking at supports in making a solid plan to teach the skills. First, on number 4, we chose multiple skills that we might want to teach. The first thing we do is choose which one we're going to teach first. In our example, we chose to teach getting attention. Then you would go in the problem solving steps and the solution. And again, this side is animated as well. Thank you. We will use the peer mediated skills from the NCPMI to teach the whole class how to get attention. This material is included in the handouts, and it also has a breakdown of how to teach each skill. So I did not go into this on the back of this sheet for this webinar. Then you would also have an adult who works with the child or children. Those who you have listed who are more likely to fight over materials in a small group or even a one-to-one setting, using those same strategies from whole group. But this time, you're also going to add the additional step of giving those students a wristlet with that visual on it or a breakaway necklace to actually have with them so they can refer back to when they're practicing those skills. And that leads us into how to provide opportunities to practice this skill. We are going to look a little more at how you can support those individual students in this example. So you're going to set up opportunities during center time for all students to practice getting another student's attention, to ask for an item that they want. But you're going to be very intentional about an adult being with those children who need that additional support. You would even set up your centers to have limited materials or to require cooperative play and sharing of materials. So they would need to get each other's attention and ask for that material. We would recommend using something called errorless learning to ensure success, which is where you support the student from the first step all the way to the last step to be successful in getting the attention and asking for what they need. We have also noted that you would decrease prompting quickly and allow the student to try those steps individually while you're still there to support. When doing the scenario, ensure the student is prepped, another student is prepped beforehand to know that he or she's going to be asked to give up an item. When you're setting these children up to learn that behavior, you don't want someone to be like, I need to keep my materials. You want to really let the other student know, hey, they're going to come ask you for this. I really need you to give it up. We'll be sure to get you another one or you'll get that one back quickly. The last step in the planning process is how are we going to reinforce the new skill of getting attention? In our example, the student will immediately receive the item he or she is requesting, along with positive descriptive feedback from the adults in the classroom as they're learning how to use this. And I just seen a question pop up of where do I find this form? It's going to be after in the webinar handouts.
And also, can you tell them what a wristlet is? Someone asked about what.
Yes, we have, they're just the little bracelets that go on your wrist, and you can purchase them on Amazon, and they're so stretchy, and you can attach a card to those. I normally have one handy, but at this moment I do not. That they're able to use, and they just wear that with the card on it, whatever they're needing to refer to. So when you go over to that student, they already have the visual you can walk through, but it's also there for them to use as they need it.
And if you're doing it with multiple kids, the teacher can also wear one, right? So the
Yes.
teacher has one at the same time. Yeah.
In addition, once the teacher and I have planned and discussed options for the whole class or small groups to teach the appropriate skill, I tend to look for an individualized action plan as the tool to further implement individualized supports for children who would benefit from additional practice and additional reinforcement to continue developing the skill. What we have shared here is a sample individualized action plan template. This template breaks down setting the goal for the child, determining the strategies to increase the use of the desired skill, and deciding the necessary materials you will need. For implementation, you and the teacher will consider how to continue teaching the skills, how to use the strategies you've chosen for support, the intensity needed for positive descriptive feedback, along with when and how you're going to share progress with the family. Having a detailed plan sets everyone up to be successful in ensuring this child continues to acquire and generalize the new replacement skill. Plus, in a follow-up session, I always facilitate conversations around, okay, the child now has the skill and they're using it. When and how do we start to decrease those supports and still maintain the use of the skill?
Nikki and Heather, this what y'all just walked through was so good. And I think one of the really important, and people are saying, can we get our hands on this? And the answer is yes. But I think one of the really important things about this is too often we think about social skills as being things you teach incidentally. And I think you do, but for kids who need more support, being this intentional and planful is really important. So I really like the way that y'all talked about this. So one of the things that I think, I can't remember, I think Heather, you talked about figuring out what the function was or figuring out what the behavior was communicating. I don't think that's always so easy, right? It's, the kid's ripping a toy out of another kid's hand, and maybe we think that's about wanting the toy, but maybe it's about getting attention, or maybe it's about they're mad at that child, right? So do you have any tips or a kind of go-to tool for how you help teachers figure out the function of the behavior?
I can actually step in and share a 6-square form that Heather and I both use to support determining the function of behavior. The function typically explains the why behind behavior, and children are typically either trying to escape or obtain something from the behavior they're displaying. The challenging behavior is working well for the child. Therefore, our strategies need to support the child in being able to have access or escaping in a more appropriate manner. When I debrief with the teacher to complete this chart, I begin with placing the challenging behavior in the middle top box. And then I collaborate with the teacher to determine what's happening right before the behavior, which goes in the antecedent box. If I'm able, I always try to observe in the classroom prior at a time the teacher thinks that behavior is more likely to occur, or in the meeting, I'm able to ask the teacher to describe the actions of herself or himself, but also the others in the classroom prior to the behavior occurring. And if there's a teacher and an assistant, I like to brainstorm with both because they may see different things happening in that classroom, depending on the time of day that the behavior is occurring. I use this information to complete the antecedent box. Typical antecedents could be a demand being placed, a student taking an object, another student not following directions sometimes will also trigger behaviors. There's a wide range of things that can be antecedents, and I just jot down what they're sharing me is going on at that moment. Then the teacher and I will look together to complete the consequence box. I typically ask questions around, does the child get adult attention? What are peers doing when this behavior is happening? What are you doing? What's your assistant going to do? Does the child get out of completing a task? Or are they able to avoid something? I use that information to come up with the function. Are they trying to escape or obtain something? And that can be a wide range of things. Escape an activity, escape attention. They can be trying to gain attention or gain access to an item or even gain access to a friend during that activity. Next, we collaborate to come up with the bottom of this form, which is the strategies to prevent, teach, and reinforce. So starting with the prevent box. This is determined by using the box directly above it, and we may add additional support such as visuals or prompts. In some cases, you can even rearrange the environment to decrease the likelihood of the behavior occurring. It's who they're sitting beside of, or maybe a center just doesn't have enough space, or maybe it has too much space. Now the teacher and I would choose a new skill to teach. Again, when we use the information from the box above to guide our skill choice, we want to make sure that we teach a skill that has the same function as the challenging behavior. For example, if the student's running out of a room, we could teach that student to ask for a break, and this could be done with words or using a visual. When looking at the reinforcement, which is the last box, you want to also consider what's currently reinforcing that behavior, what's the current consequence. We want to ensure we don't continue the same reinforcement of the challenging behavior that we've been doing. For example, for elopement, you might install a gate to prevent escape, but limit your interaction when the child goes to the gate. Instead, you may offer a simple alternative, such as, would you like to visit the cozy area, or would you like to choose your own seat at the carpet? Reinforcing the new skill is equally as important to ensure that they want to use this skill and that it gets them access. Each time that child would ask for a break, they would be able to take a break and receive praise for asking, such as, thank you for showing me your break card. You may take the break now. While completing this form with the teachers, they're able to think through situations that may have initially appeared to come out of nowhere, and they develop a better understanding of the why or the function of that behavior.
That was so good. So I want to just respond to a couple of quick questions, and then I'm gonna again move us on a little bit here. But so there are a couple of questions about what do you do if teachers say there doesn't seem to be anything that triggers the behavior? And that's a very common thing for teachers to say. And I think that when you're a teacher in a classroom with 18, or if you're working in kindergarten, even more kids than that, it's hard for you to see what happens before the behavior occurs, right? And that's really what the trigger is. And so we think that it's about providing some support to that teacher, right? So the teacher really might feel like it comes out of nowhere because they don't see it until it happens because they're busy with other kids. And so that's what a behavior support person is going to help with, is going to help do observations. If you don't have a behavior support person, that might be, if you're in an early childhood setting, it might be like a director, right? But different people can help you do that. But I think when people think there's no trigger, it's just that they don't have the opportunity to sit back and observe. And we don't necessarily want teachers to sit back and observe, because then they're not part of the context. And often it's something about the teaching environment that might be triggering the behavior. So that's a very quick answer to that question. Excuse me. So I'm going to kind of move us on, excuse me. The next question is there a resource to support teachers in sustaining this process after they've used coaching?
Yeah, we actually, I'll pick up here and kind of go into the tool that's on the next slide. And it was designed with sustainability in mind. And we know that teachers won't always have access to a coach or specifically a behavior analyst, short-term or long-term. And so this can kind of help guide teachers when analyzing challenging behavior. So you'll have access to this as well. On the top, you'll see it's kind of in the blue section, and that is the kind of a check-in to see, do we have these preventative strategies in place? We know an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? So behavior can either occur, like Nikki said, to obtain something or to escape something. And we have listed out some of the preventative strategies that can actually also be aligned to the why the behavior is occurring to maybe make a bigger impact on behavior change. And then the middle section in the yellow, you'll see that when challenging behavior occurs, try this first. And that was really created because oftentimes in the heat of the moment, our responses to challenging behavior can intensify the situation. And in the middle of a challenging behavior, typically we know isn't the time to teach a new skill, right? So we want to help teachers connect with the child first, acknowledge the child's possible emotion, and then gather more information before jumping into any conclusions or implementing a consequence in the moment. And so when we actually listen and observe, it can help lead us to the why that Nikki was talking about and you were talking about, and really, why is this behavior occurring? And once we've connected that and gathered them for a little bit more information, we can then respond calmly. And that may look like modeling the appropriate calm down strategy, or redirecting the child to an appropriate behavior, or using the problem solving steps to generate a solution. And so we know if we want to see behavior change, we have to teach new skills to help meet those needs. So in the purple section down below, there are some example replacement behaviors based on the why or the possible function of the challenging behavior. And this really just lists out some examples. If you're trying to gain attention, here's what you can teach them to do instead. If you're trying to escape something, you can request a break or ask for an alternative activity. So we can begin to plan out what we want to teach the child to get their needs met in a more appropriate way, and always aligning or trying to align the replacement behavior to the why is critical in seeing behavior change. Otherwise, I feel like, at least in my practice, you can feel like you're starting to play whack-a-mole. One behavior goes away, another one pops up because we're not meeting that internal need for them to get their needs met. And then, of course, on the bottom, reinforce, reinforce, reinforce. If we want to see the skill continue, we need to provide reinforcement. So hopefully people will find this tool beneficial.
Sorry, I think this is so helpful. And I think that reinforce part also is about children getting their needs met, right? That's part of the reinforcement. So, all right, what do we do if you're implementing all these individual supports and challenging behaviors still happening?
At this point, we refer back to our flowchart, and on the screen, you will see a possible outcome area of our flowchart. So challenging behavior obviously is working for the child, and it takes time to see change. There are many possible outcomes when addressing challenging behavior, and we look at those of our flowchart again. The most desired outcome would be that you have fidelity with the current supports and sufficient progress. At that point, you would continue coaching and focus back on classroom ride practices. Next, the practices are not consistently in place and you're seeing limited progress of the challenging behavior. At this point, I would use coaching to have more in-depth reflection and constructive feedback around barriers to implementing the strategies. I would also offer the use of additional coaching strategies such as side-by-side support or even modeling for the teacher. If the teacher is willing, you could also video record, which is a stronger effective practice. This video recording would only need to be viewed by the teacher. So it's something when you come in and you observe, you could video and just leave it with the teacher, or have the teacher video him or herself. This is also a strategy that could be used for those moments when the function just appears to, or the behavior appears to come out of nowhere, that they could actually look back at that lesson and see that from that standpoint. And lastly, you may have fidelity but limited progress. At this point is where we typically call a support team meeting. And members of our team would include the teacher, the coach, and the family would come in to have conversations around that. Administration, behavior specialists, and teacher assistants could also be invited, along with any other direct services being provided to that child. We collaborate around potential resources that could be in our schools or our centers, or also even community resources that may be available, such as play therapy, PT, and OT. This is the point where we tend to look at prevent, teach, reinforce process, just to further explore the function and be sure our strategies are aligned to that.
So I love that. And a question that somebody had was about whether you could use the 6-square form with families. And the answer to that's absolutely yes. And often when we do the behavior support team meetings that she was just talking about, families will be a part of those meetings, right? And we're generally, when we're working with classroom teachers, working to develop those plans for the classroom, but we can also use that form to help families develop a plan for at home. So it absolutely can be used with families. And there are some examples of completed forms on the challengingbehavior.org website. All right. So my next question, and this is a little bit long, is that throughout the pandemic, our field has just really had to figure out a way to support teachers and families from a distance, right? In more, ways using technology. And so, Johanna, I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about how you can do the processes we've been talking about today, but do them through distance coaching, and just what advice you would have for people who are doing that.
Sure. I feel like I have a bit of an advantage since I do most of my coaching distantly anyway. And so in the last 2 years, we've really been thrown into this, sometimes virtual only in some settings. So I just outlined some strategies that we use and my colleagues use. And that would be, number one is to listen. Right. So when we hear a classroom teacher or team mention that they're observing some challenging behavior within their classroom, I really want to be that listening ear and hear what's going on. And to be quite honest with you, there's a lot of emotion usually portrayed there. And one of the things that really comes out is this acknowledgement around self-care. Right. So we have teachers who are pretty overwhelmed right now, families who are overwhelmed, and really just being empathetic and listening. Also during that time, really learning more about what's occurring within that classroom. Sometimes we're quite limited to knowing what is going on in the classroom as coaches, especially if we're not allowed inside the classrooms. So I will request more information, right? I want to know what's happening within the classroom, what's that particular routine during the day that may be most challenging, either for the teacher and or the child. And I always request video, right? So now we have more accessibility to video function. And I feel like it's almost like data, right? It's only useful if we use it, right? So we want to make sure that we're actually using those video clips and any type of data collection that we're receiving, and making sure that we're watching that potentially, ideally with the team and or at least the teacher, right? That we're looking at it together. We could analyze the video. We could analyze what's happening. I realize sometimes this is a not comfortable situation for many of our teachers to see themselves on video, but there is such a value behind it. And I do want to add that this isn't a new coaching tool. It's just one that we're using more often now. So after watching that video, we could really see what is happening within those universal practices, right? That Nikki and Heather so eloquently explain these 5 universal practices. Are we seeing a 5-to-1 ratio? Are we seeing that there's schedules and routines and kids know what they're supposed to be doing, or behavior expectations being reviewed, and also any social peer interactions. I also think the value of videotaping is you want to be mindful of how you're videotaping, right? So you might tell a teacher, oh, just videotape it and then I'll watch it with you. I really am pretty specific with teams, like, please, I would like to see whomever's supporting that child, say if it's a large group setting, or I really need to see the front view of the teacher, or I need to see the child and the teacher interacting together. So creating a plan on what that video looks like. Then discussing what are some other variables that may be going on that I might not be able to hear or see because I'm not in the classroom, right? So, what is the viewpoint from the parent's perspective around this behavior? Do we know if there's been any changes within the home schedule or routines? Have there been any changes in the schedule or routines within the classrooms? This week, I'm hearing a lot from coaches and teachers saying that, sometimes a teacher's out, whether it's quarantining or leaving, right? And so now we have a new teacher, and there's a lot of variables going on in the environment that may be out of our control, but it's still really helpful to know when we're talking about helping an individual child around their behavior. And as Heather and Nikki were stating, this idea of really trying to figure out, what is this function? What's the function of the behavior? What is the child trying to tell us? And trying to capture that within the video and discussion with the team. Then from there, creating an informal behavior support plan, really figuring out what are some universal practices we can do, or targeted practices within that particular routine that they're struggling with. And then coaching, right? I love that it was mentioned before that coaching never stops. We are using practice-based coaching when we're supporting teachers, supporting individual children. So.
All right.
Helped.
So the video's next, Johanna?
The video is next. So we're going to watch a really quick video of a program. This was like the first week into school.
I'm sorry.
Sorry. It's a really quick video. So we're going to watch the video first, and then we'll do a little debrief.
Come and roll the dice. Can you roll the dice? Not yet. Time to sit. Thank you. I know, I'm going to change it. All right. We are going to clap hands when we count. Ready, Liam? It's Liam's turn. It's Liam's turn. Thank you. Liam's turn. Nice hands. All right, Liam, ready? We're going to count. 1.
Okay, so that was a really short video clip, and I hope you were able to see a little bit of what was going on. I could explain a little bit more. So this is a first-year classroom that we're working with, and actually this was the first week of school. And so the teacher did a really nice job meeting with all families before school started. Families were able to come in and tour the classroom individually with masks on, which was really nice. What the teacher was learning was this little boy, this was his first experience in a preschool setting. He also has very limited language, functional communication. This is his first time with multiple peers too. So what they were noticing is that So I'll go over these steps with you all. So what's happening when the behavior occurs, right? So when the behavior was occurring, and let's just focus on the large group time, this little boy was having a hard time sitting and waiting for his turn. He was so excited when the teacher would go through each routine of the large group time, and he wanted to be the helper every time, right? So it was mentioned before, and I want to say that Heather was bringing up as far as that motivation, right? His motivation was built into circle time. It was built into holding that pointer, right? And being the teacher's helper. So we know that's happening there, right? But you also can't just, right? In preschool, we have to take turns. We have to wait for our turn. And what was starting to happen was this little boy would show aggression towards other peers who were being the teacher's helper, right? So what we did was we got a video example. It was like an hour and a half, so I figured we would spare you the hour and a half video. But I was able to see a lot. So then working with the coach who's on the ground there, as well as the teaching team, we were able to create a really informal plan, right? It was a coaching plan. So we needed to figure out what's the possible function. And even with this short video clip, we can see that the possible function is that this little boy wants access to being the teacher's helper, right? Or maybe even the pointer, but he was appropriately doing it. So we need to provide some sort of communication for him, and also some tools on knowing when to wait. Because what was happening in the initial video was the teacher would say, okay, you need to sit down. He would sit down and then she would give him the pointer. Like, it was really quick. It was so quick between the inappropriate behavior and getting reinforced that it was almost providing a mixed message to this little boy, right? So we came together and we're like, okay, so this is what we need to do. We need to help support him, and knowing that you wait for your turn. He receives a lot of reinforcement just by patting him on the back and telling him with positive, specific praise that you're doing a great job, you're waiting your turn, and then having multiple opportunities to, as he's sitting successfully, to have an opportunity to have a turn as a teacher's helper. So one of the prevention strategies that the team created or thought of was that we needed to, or the team, I say we, because usually I'm with my teams doing this, creating some visual supports. So he understood, what am I supposed to be doing right now, right? And that's what Heather was sharing, or Nikki was sharing, as far as, what am I supposed to do? How do I know I'm making progress? When do I know when I'm done? And what do I do next? And so that was supporting him there. So the new skills that we want to teach, there are a few, right? But during this particular routine, really that waiting, keeping my hands to myself, right? The behavior expectations, and having an opportunity. We didn't have to teach him the circle time because he knew that really well. And then how are we going to respond to the inappropriate behavior? They were going to do more of a redirect, right? Sitting back, and they decided to use a cube chair at first. I can tell you now that he is sitting on the rug with his peers, which is excellent. So let's just see what the visuals that the team created. So these were created next day. I want to share that too. I think it's really important, this value in following through with action steps, and trying it, giving it a try, right? So what you can see here is a mini visual schedule of the routine of the large group, because he was so invested and excited about the routines. We thought it would be helpful for him to see all the routines. He could also have a little bit of manipulation of what the activities were and putting it in the all done, because they do all done right at the end of each one, what the rules are, the expectations, and also where his seat is. So now you could see he has a spot on the rug. They're also using a first then, right? First you wait, then you get to a turn. So these visuals, and I will say that the first time they tried it, it was a marked improvement. But still we need a shape, right? And that's the benefit of coaching and ongoing coaching.
So Johanna, we're kind of running out of time, but can you just, I'm going off script. Can you just, I think you were going to talk about some real quick tips. Can you leave people with the big tips real quickly?
Real quick. So one is keep it simple. We don't need to complicate things. Many times our plans are just on the action plan tool that you could find on the NCPMI website. Or one pager, keeping it simple, focus on one routine during the day and potentially one behavior, right? Work on it, right? Work on one behavior at a time. So it's not so overwhelming. And what we know is that generalization occurs once we become confident and comfortable in implementing some of these new strategies, not new strategies, but more individualized strategies. We then generalize to other times during the day in supporting the child. Also, I mentioned before, focus on one routine. I go off script too, by the way. And then collecting information, right? And so here's the benefit of videos. Videos are excellent for showing pre and post and progress. And at the end, let me tell you, celebrate, right? Come together, even if it's virtually, and celebrate and honor one another. And then always include an action plan, always.
So that actually is kind of a good way to wrap up. So I was thinking about a couple of things, Johanna, while you were talking. I wish we had another 30 minutes, but one is when you say action plan, I'm thinking about those visuals you showed, and you said they started doing it the next day, but y'all had a plan for getting those visuals made. And I think that's really important, that if you meet with a teacher at 3 o'clock and they're going to start a plan the next day, y'all got to figure out how we're going to get the visuals made by the next day. And that might mean the coach is helping do it, right? So I like the keep coaching thing that you said, which is that I think sometimes things get a little bit better and we back off. And for these kids, we don't need to back off, right? We need to keep supporting and keep helping teachers think about when it's time to kind of decrease support, right? And then the last question I want to answer, and because we're so short on time, I'm going to do it very quickly, is there were a couple of questions about how holidays and other events might affect kids' behaviors. And I think if we just take this child that Johanna was just talking about, it's not that the fact that it's a holiday or whatever is going to change the child's behavior. It may just make his behavior more likely to be triggered, right? That if a child's rested and everything's kind of normal and consistent and predictable, the same trigger might not have as much of an impact on a child. But when things are kind of out of kilter and we're not keeping with our same routine and there's special events going on, triggers might be more powerful for kids, but it doesn't change the basic trigger. But what we would say is that at times when there's something that some setting event, something going on outside the immediate context of the interaction that might be impacting the child, we increase our support for the child. We don't decrease it. So we give them more feedback, or we give them quicker feedback, or we give them more opportunities rather than fewer opportunities. So anyway, I wish we had a lot more time, but we are right at the end of our time. So Nikki, Heather, and Johanna, y'all were fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you so very much to all of our panelists for their wonderful insights. Your feedback is very important to the work that we do. Please remember to provide your feedback on this webinar with our post-webinar survey by typing the web address shown on this slide into your internet browser. Your certificate of attendance will appear once you submit the survey. We invite you to visit our website, challengingbehavior.org, to sign up for our upcoming webinars, access recordings, download pyramid model resources, and more. Thank you to our funder for making this webinar possible. This concludes our webinar. Thank you all and have a great rest of your day.